Hey, this is Web3 Talks. The rule of this podcast is simple. We only talk with people who have hands-on Web3 building experience. So if you are a hacker, entrepreneur, or investor, you can get inspired by their stories, lessons, and fuck-ups. My name is Mac, and I'm hosting this pod. If you want to stay in touch, go to twitter.com/Web3Talks, click the link in the pinned tweet, and join our Discord community. Let's go. Hello, today's guest is Haardik, co-founder of LearnWeb3 DAO, which is a pretty cool one-stop shop to learn how to be a Web3 developer. So you don't need to know anything about programming, actually. Like, even if you start the course, you have links to some basics of Java or whatever is necessary, even if it's not typically Web3, which is pretty cool. So Haardik, like, your project has grown pretty big. Like, it has, as far as I understand, over 50,000 students. So how do you feel running such a big thing?
Honestly, it's kind of crazy. I've said this before a few times, but the way we started and where we're at now is so far apart, because this was never sort of meant to be like a company or a startup or anything. It was just meant to be us helping out like literally like 4 friends. And it grew from that to over 50,000 students now. That's kind of insane. And honestly, the best thing about running this is genuinely the impact we actually see. It's actually like visible to us on people's lives, people who were like struggling financially or were like lived in regions of the world that aren't like super politically stable and had issues. They were able to learn about this tech sitting at home and get so far on with their lives. It's absolutely amazing to see. Yeah,
it's a beautiful mission, especially as we need so many Web3 devs right now. And even though it's a bear market, do you see any, signs of slowdown, or people still want to learn?
Absolutely not. In fact, I think the bear market was kind of a decent reason for us to have like sort of explosive growth in those times. I think around May or June, when we were looking at around peak bear market times, we were getting more students than ever, because it just seemed like we also like spent some time tracking that information, right? Like we compile like statistics across like statistics of developer activity across like Bitcoin and Ethereum based off of on-chain data and based off of like GitHub data and things like that. And the worse the bear market becomes, the more people are interested in building, is what we found. Because everybody's like, okay, I've had enough of this DeFi stuff. I've had enough of investing in crypto and losing all my money. So I'm just going to learn how to build. And that seems like a safe long-term bet. So yeah, I think it was interesting to learn that. It was also kind of like good timing. But yeah.
So when have you started? When was like this, first lesson for your 4 friends that you mentioned?
Yeah, so I think it kind of goes back to sort of how me and Casey met. So Casey is my co-founder. So it actually started off as like 2 separate projects. Casey and I were strangers before we started LearnWeb3. We never met each other before. So the way it actually kind of happened was in December of 2021, we had a friend of mine, like I had a friend of mine who'd been working at like a big FANG company, Web2, for a really long time. They wanted to get into Web3 stuff and didn't really like sort of the resources that were available at the time. They went through it all. You name them, they've done it. And they didn't really like enjoy it a lot. And they asked me for help, like, can I send them other resources? So my background in the space was primarily as a protocol engineer. So I was doing like protocol engineering across a variety of different things over the last few years. So I hadn't really looked at sort of, like beginner focused resources in a really long time. So it was Christmas holidays. I don't celebrate Christmas. I'm not Christian. So I was just I had some free time. I started Googling. I spoke to some other project founders, asked them like, hey, how do you get your Web2 hires onboarded onto Web3 and things like that. And everything looked like a shit show. It wasn't great. The experience wasn't great. I didn't find any resources I was a huge fan of either. So just took that opportunity with those few extra days to I was like, okay, like if I had to start from scratch, what knowledge would I consider absolutely essential or like the first steps you should take to get into this space? My initial plan was we do this through presentations like Google Slides with a voiceover on top and record it as a video and send it out. In this time, I spent a couple days putting together like a really hacky, really shitty looking LearnWeb3.io website and built like a few slides and things like that. Next thing I was going to do is, I remember this is on December 14th. On December 14th, I bought the domain name in the morning. The next thing I was going to do was I was going to go and register the Twitter handle. I went on Twitter, I searched for LearnWeb3, and I see this post by this person named Casey fucking 20 minutes ago saying, hey, I'm starting this project called LearnWeb3 to help people get onto like become developers in this. I'm like, what the fuck, man? So I just DM'd him. I'm like, hey, dude, could you give me that Twitter handle, please? And he got back. He's like, no, I literally just started this. I'm not giving this over. So we talked a little bit. We talked about sort of what we're trying to do. We figured that we have somewhat the same goals and the same visions. We got on a call, spent a couple hours on Discord. This happened for a couple of days. We got on calls pretty regularly until we felt somewhat comfortable with each other. And eventually we basically decided to merge our two initiatives. So it's like I would take care of more of like the technical aspect. Casey's more of like on like a DevRel growth sort of role. So we sort of merged those initiatives and we had like really complementary skills that worked pretty well. And yeah, again, as I mentioned right at the beginning, it was just like I was trying to help my friends and he was trying to help like he had a decent following on Twitter at the time, around 10,000 people, I think. So he wanted to help the people who was asking him questions about Web3 all day long. So it was just meant as something that we can give back to the community, kind of. Before you know it, we officially, quote unquote, launched on December 17th, where we gave 1,000 people access to the platform. It was kind of like closed beta, so we capped it at 1,000 people. We had 1,000 people come in there and we opened it up publicly on like a couple days after New Year's. And by the end of January, I think we had about 7,000 people there. So yeah, after that, the rest is just history. It just kept growing and growing and growing. And we were just forced to add more content and more content and more content till the point we were spending much more time on LearnWeb3 than we were at our day jobs. So we had to start thinking about, okay, how do we make this sustainable now? This has grown far beyond our expectations.
How have you acquired, you first users beyond, the friends that you wanted to help? Because you said that you had a closed beta for 1,000 people. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of users. How have you done it?
So it was kind of a mix. So prior to LearnWeb3, I was part of this like Indian sort of developer community. I was an admin there. I helped sort of set it up in the early days. So there was this developer community I was helping run, which had around, I think, like 4,000 people in it. It wasn't like Web3 focused, it was just general, like general dev stuff, mostly like college kids. And Casey had a Twitter following, which was also like developer focused as well. So our first sort of the 1,000 people came and like we posted a tweet on the LearnWeb3 account saying first 1,000 people to follow get invite to the closed beta. And then as soon as we hit 1,000 follows on the LearnWeb3 Twitter account, we like locked that account up and then DM'd everyone who had followed us up until that point a Discord invite link. So, I mean, that was filled up in like, we shared that link. I shared it on like my community. He shared it on his like main profile and things like that. And we had it in like an hour. So before I'd met Casey, I only had 5 people in that server. So I guess like technically we had 1,005 people in the closed beta, but yeah.
It shows a lot like it's good to have your audience before you build a product, in a sense that, it makes it much easier. Because if you know their problems, you have the audience, you just sell, hey, like this is the product I have. Maybe you want to test it out.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you could probably do this even if you didn't have a big audience, because I think at the time there was just a need. Like anybody I talked to who was experienced in the space, who had spent some time in the Web3 space full time, they agreed with me 100% that the current resources weren't cutting it. And there were other platforms sort of with similar goals, but different approaches who came out roughly at the same time and were able to build up. So I don't think the audience was the key part. I think the audience helped us get like a certain initial following going. And at the same time, I think for our personal motivations, if we didn't have that audience, maybe if it was always just meant for 5 people, it would have never grown to the point it has now. So it was good motivation and stuff, but I mean, I wouldn't say it's a necessity to have an audience beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, like the market was definitely ready and waiting for this kind of product. And I'm wondering, because you said that you had, there were different approaches to solving this problem. You said that, very few projects are able to really deliver on the promise of teaching you Web3. There's one that I love, but it's super basic. Crypto Zombies is amazing, but it's like very, very basic. So I'm wondering, like, what's the difference between LearnWeb3 DAO and like typical, coding courses that people might take?
Absolutely. So when we started, I think there's like 3 categories. We can probably divide them into based on sort of style of teaching. And then there's another couple of categories based on sort of like the medium used for teaching. So when it comes to like style of teaching, at the time when we were starting out, the categories we saw was either something that was very, very introductory. So like focused on sort of 101 tutorials and things like that. And that's okay up until a point where like, what do you do after that, right? Like, where do you go from there? So we wanted to have something that actually like helps you get to a point where you can go into this space full-time, land an actual job. It's like you don't land an actual full-time job in this space by knowing how to build an NFT contract. Maybe last bull market, sure, with 100,000 NFT projects every day, you could have, but that's not like realistic long-term. And that's probably not like what people want to do, right? They want to work on like more meaningful problems and more impactful problems. So we wanted to take them beyond the introductory point. That was one thing we noticed. The other thing was sort of the quote unquote good courses. Like there's a couple of programs out there I'm personally a really big fan of, but they're just simply way too expensive. A lot of our audience, especially with my background, right? A lot of my community came from India, and, exchange rates, and it's a huge deal. Like currency pricing can be very, very different, and affordability means a very different thing here than it does there. So in India, like I am seeing these courses that are really good quality for sure, but they cost like 5,000 US dollars. 5,000 US dollars, you convert that into Indian rupees, and you're talking about like 4, 5, 6 month salary for a junior developer in India. They're not spending that much for something that they just want to explore, right? They don't even know what it is yet. So it's just like there was a gap. I was like, okay, like there's good courses out there, but the target market, people who actually want to learn, who can actually be impacted from this, and the people who have the money to buy that course for real are different markets entirely. So that was another second goal of ours. We want to have this 100% free, and that's one of our core values, right? LearnWeb3 is always free for students. I think those two were there. And lastly, there were like some projects which were kind of, I really don't like them. I think kind of like Crypto Zombies, I would say. I mean, I think like Crypto Zombies can be fun, it's interesting, whatever, but it's too focused on Solidity. It's very, very focused on Solidity. And I say this at least once a day to someone or the other, but Web3 is so much more than Solidity. Solidity is such a tiny, tiny part of it. Like, let's say you go get a job at Uniswap tomorrow, right? Are you going to be writing Uniswap smart contracts? Probably not, right? Probably not, because Uniswap smart contracts are barely updated. They're updated like once every couple of years. The people that are working on those are very, very experienced in that space. They have a lot of experience in that space. And Solidity is definitely not the only thing that they know. And for a junior developer who's just learning about this, it's an unrealistic expectation to set that you'll get a full-time role as a Solidity developer. So we wanted to show people that, fuck man, like Solidity is like a tiny part. It's like single-digit percentages of what this whole Web3 field encompasses. So why focus on that so much? Like, go beyond it. Look at the ecosystem. Look at IPFS. Look at Chainlink, Ceramic, the graph, things like that. Learn about those things. Learn about non-EVM chains. It's not always about smart contracts either. Like, there are things in Web3 that have nothing to do with blockchains. IPFS being a great example of that. There's so many other things that weren't being covered. Yeah, this is a long answer, but those were like the categories we saw at the time that we wanted to fix.
Yeah, I can really feel that, like, because I always try products before I invite a guest. So I tried LearnWeb3 DAO, and what I found is it's very comprehensive, and you sometimes even do what very few courses do, is that you link to external sources. So it's not like you need to cover everything yourself. If there's a good article on Code Academy about, I don't know, backend engineering, you can link it to it, and that's okay. I think this openness is a very good thing. And also, like, one thing that I'm seeing is that you connect your Discord, so you can get roles based on, the stages that you do, and you can connect your wallet to get NFT certificates for your learning. And you can also create like a LinkedIn style profile there to land a job. Like, to wrap it up, I think that your promise, like, from zero to hero, so like from, person that wants to learn Web3 to landing a job, is really delivered. So, like, on every stage, you really, really do it. So that's very cool. So, I'm wondering, like, how does it look right now? Because you have 50,000 students, over 50,000. You have a giant Discord channel with, I don't know, 35,000 people or something like that. So I'm wondering, like, how do you manage that? How do you make sure that so many people are happy with the course? Because that's, many different perspectives that you need to, combine in one product.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest, by far, the most help we've gotten from is the absolutely amazing community we have. So from day one, actually, this is another point. One of the things we noticed about some of the other education platforms was they weren't necessarily treating this as a community. And we wanted this to be sort of a community owned education thing, more of like a Web3 developer community to start off with. And some of the members, like you get people who are more active, people who've been around longer. From day one, we've tried to sort of imbibe this culture of being helpful and being friendly, and the simple saying, like, there are no stupid questions, right? I've had people ask me, like, the simplest of things, like something that a developer who's been coding for like maybe like a year will think, oh, like, how do you not know this? But it's not like there are no stupid questions. We take people who have never written a line of code in their life. They come in, they ask questions, and we answer them, right? You don't judge people, anybody. So we've tried to imbibe that culture from day one, particularly by ourselves. Like when we were starting out, I know there were a lot of days I was spending 12 hours a day just replying to people on Discord. And over time, like the community follows. So our community members kind of did the same too. We have a lot of people who've been relentlessly helping out, answering people's questions, or like supporting the community, helping us in other ways, things like that. So today, that's how I'd say all of this is taken care of. I would say that 50,000 students, it may sound big for, I guess, like a quote unquote Web3 platform where a lot of Web3 users don't really like come close to 50,000 students. But the way we view it is this is really this is really just the beginning. I think we recently did some statistical analysis of sort of developers around the world, and I think there's estimated to be around 25 million developers around the world, like overall. But in Web3, according to the most recent data, there's an estimated 150 to 250,000 developers, which is around like 1%, half to 1% of the overall thing. So I think there's a huge potential for growth, and 50,000 is just the beginning. And our goal is to like 10x that, 100x that over time. So we'll be faced with more challenges, more experiments we'll be running. What's available now is, I like to think of it, this is the MVP. Yeah.
How does this experience look like? For example, I'm a new guy. I started my account on LearnWeb3 DAO. I joined Discord, and what happens there? Like, how can I get, engaged in the community?
So yeah, I mean, typically you would sign on the website, right? Create an account, start learning. We have a sort of new user onboarding flow the first time you create an account on the website. So the first time you create an account, we'll walk you through like, okay, join the Discord, right? You join the Discord if you have any questions, if you have any doubts, if you want to like meet people who are on a similar journey as you, whatever, like join the Discord and you'll find somebody there. The second step, we ask you to like connect to your Discord and connect your wallet for receiving those roles and NFT certificates and whatnot. After they do that, they kind of like, they're going through the courses by themselves. It's all self-paced, right? So they go through like the text version, or some of them have like video versions as well. So they go through that. If they have any doubts, they come on the Discord, they ask questions, we answer them, somebody answers them. Apart from that, in the Discord, we're getting more active with running our events again. So in the past, we used to have pretty regular events that got sort of paused for a little while we were pitching. Pitching is a full-time job. So we're now like, we're restarting all of those again. So we have like Web3 Wednesdays now, where we're going to talk about like some hot topic that's going on these days. So next Wednesday actually is we're going to be talking about the merge, what it means for Ethereum and things like that. We usually have white paper discussions where we take up like we did like the Bitcoin white paper, the Ethereum white paper, did the IPFS white paper. We're thinking of doing like either Solana or like Polygon's white paper next. So we're going to do that. We have community calls every couple of weeks or so, just to talk about like random stuff, see how people are feeling, what the vibe is, what we're doing good, what we're doing bad, things like that. We have Twitter spaces where we talk about we invite people. Twitter spaces are a whole thing. Like they can be very varied. They can be about either getting new audience, right? Like introducing them to LearnWeb3 for the first time, or it can be about sort of getting somebody experienced in the space to come in and do like a talk with us, talk about sort of their journey, or it can be about a past LearnWeb3 student who's now working full time and talking about their journey, or, it can be about a variety of different things. And then obviously the Discord also has some like, random channels like wellness, memes, shit talking, gaming, things like that. It's pretty fun to look at. Yeah.
And do you still make hackathons? Because I've seen somewhere that hackathons has been mentioned there on Discord.
Yeah, so we don't really run our own. We were going to. If you had asked me this question maybe a couple months ago, I would have said yes, we were going to be hosting our own hackathons, but we've sort of changed direction on that a little bit, where we realized that hackathon organization is a whole thing in itself, where there are literal companies like huge, ETH Global, right? ETH Global, massive company. And arguably, like the main focus, the main value they have is like they run hackathons, right? And they have like a huge team to do that. Organizing hackathons aren't easy. And there's a lot of like logistical challenges that go into it that aren't obvious until you try to run one yourself. So we kind of changed direction on that, where we're not going to sort of run our own, because we don't have the resources or the manpower to sort of handle that. But we kind of decided that what we're going to do is we're going to partner up with other sort of hackathon organizers in this space, or like companies who are running their own hackathons, and give them the community exposure to LearnWeb3, and simultaneously like act as sort of mentors and technical support, quote unquote, for hackers at the hackathon and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the one we just ran over the weekend, it was in partnership with the university. It wasn't like entirely organized by us, but we were like there as mentors, and we were there as technical support, and a lot of our community took part in that. Yeah.
I'm wondering, because, when you look at LearnWeb3 DAO, you might think, okay, like it's just like a learning platform and there's Discord channel and so on. So like from technical point of view, it might look easy, but I'm sure it's not. Like most things that look easy are typically very hard to do. And I'm wondering, what have been the hardest technical challenges you had on the way?
As for the platform itself, I honestly wouldn't say it's like a really hard thing to build. I don't know. It's a website that connects to Discord, connects to Wallet, has a database in the background, and saves some stuff. That was fine. I think one of the more interesting problems we had was, for the longest time, for I think like our first 6 months, we were live. So we have quizzes. So as you're going through our courses and you're doing these lessons, right? If it's a theoretical lesson, for example, how does proof of work work, which doesn't really involve coding, but it's more like a theory lesson on how the algorithm works. So for those kind of lessons, we have quizzes, which are graded. And for the longest time, those quizzes used to run off of Google Forms, which was a horrible user experience, because Google Forms are just trash. But it was done that way because it was like a hacky, quick thing to do. Who's going to build your own infrastructure for that in the early days? Plus, it was a decision we made that as we grew, more and more people were struggling with it. Also, Google's APIs aren't that great, and sort of grading all of those quizzes and giving out the proper roles and NFT certificates and everything. It's kind of bad. I can go into more technical details on why it's bad, but in a nutshell, it was pretty bad. It was pretty slow to deal with that. So we wanted to do like an in-house quiz solution. And what we wanted to do was like, as you're going through the lesson, right, the questions appear in the middle of them. Now, the challenge there is our course content, all of it is open source, right? All of it is on GitHub, so the community can make edits to it, or if there's like any bugs, or let's say like hard hat gets updated one day and some instructions need to be changed somewhere. So it's open source, so the community can edit with it. So we had to figure out a way of how do we embed quiz questions exactly where we want them to be, coming from a file that's hosted on GitHub that doesn't have that quiz question embedded in, because otherwise people know what the right answer is going to be already. So without leaking that information, how do we embed it exactly where it is? And I don't know if you're familiar with like Markdown. It's like a, like a writing syntax thing. So we use like Markdown for all of our course content files. So what we ended up doing was there's this thing called MDX, it's like Markdown extended or something like that, which basically allows you to embed like React components inside a Markdown file. And for the things we had to do, we ended up actually writing a custom Markdown compiler, well, MDX compiler to be specific, that would like sort of parse the Markdown file, display all the regular content as it's meant to be displayed. But if it comes across like a quiz section or like a few other components that we built, it would, instead of rendering them as Markdown, it would sort of replace them, query the backend for all the options, show up as a quiz question. And then when you submit, it would check against like, is it the right answer? Is it not the right answer? Things like that. So building that MDX compiler was kind of an interesting aspect of this. Most of the other website, I wouldn't say it's too hard to build. One thing I like that, I think the hardest tech problems aren't per se on the website, but on the courses. Because when we create courses, that's a lot of research and development work, because we're not always doing courses that we already have 100% knowledge on. Some of the things we do, we don't already have 100% knowledge on. So I think there we face harder problems sometimes than actually like maintenance of the website per se.
Regarding these quizzes, it's really cool because like, for those of you who didn't try it, like it's like you read some part of the text and then you have a question right there about the passage that you've read. So it's a very natural way of testing your knowledge instead of, read these 20 pages and then answer these questions. So it's really cool because you can, as Web3 and Web2 as well, can be pretty complex. You can already test if you understood it properly. So this is really cool. So I'm wondering, because you've grown pretty big, so how have user acquisition changed over time? Because you are like less than a year old. Yeah, you're like 9 months old. It's 21st, so a little bit more. So I'm wondering like how has it changed over time?
User acquisition has changed in the sense that initially, so when you look at these social platforms like Twitter, right, they all have a meta. For those of you who are like not familiar with what a meta is, it's kind of like the overall game of like slight changes in the algorithm or what kind of posts the algorithm likes these days and how you change your post structure to sort of fit with that so you can reach as many people as possible. So for the initial days, I think like we had a pretty strong handle on what was going on in the Twitter meta and what kind of posts would do well, what kind of posts would not do well. Before we posted a tweet, we could already know, okay, like, yeah, we're going to post this, it's going to get 300 likes and it's going to get this many comments. And we were pretty close to actual results at the end of the day every single time. Even today, I think like to some extent we can predict that, okay, before we even post, this is how much engagement it's going to get. So, I mean, for the longest time, I think most of our acquisition was happening through Twitter because we were playing the Twitter meta game. Following that, however, I think there's audiences that we are targeting that don't necessarily live on Twitter. I'd say Twitter is much more used in the West than it is in the East part of the world. And most of the people who come to us from the eastern half of the world usually don't come through us from Twitter. So we've kind of like started expanding to like other social platforms, to target those people. Plus, also Twitter is, from what I've seen in my experience at least, Twitter has like two kinds of people. It either has like absolute beginner folks, when we're talking about like tech Twitter, quote unquote. It either has absolute beginner folks or it has like really high up sort of elite people. There's not a lot of middle ground folks there who are active, or even if they are, they're not like posting or engaging with stuff a lot. They're just talking. So there's this market of sort of people who are sort of in the middle ground level. They've been developers, they're in Web2, maybe working a corporate job or working whatever, want to get into Web3. That doesn't really exist on Twitter. Then there's this audience of students who might still be in college or might still be in university. And in college, Twitter isn't really a college social platform to be on. It's like Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, So there's these different audiences that we've realized that simply don't exist on Twitter. And sort of like we're expanding to other social media platforms to engage with those. We're expanding to sort of doing as many events as we can, real life events, virtual events, doing workshops. Yesterday, for example, was the International NFT Day. I don't know if you knew about that or not, but yesterday marked 5 years since the first time ERC 721 was created. So yesterday we helped celebrate sort of International NFT Day along with OpenSea and Dapper Labs and A16Z Crypto and so on. And we have a workshop over there coming out next week for like around NFTs and things. We're expecting about 500 to 1,000 people on there. And, like just going to more hackathons, going to ETH global hackathons, doing a workshop there before the hackathon starts, going to a university, virtually or real life, doing a workshop there about what Ethereum is, what Web3 is, or all of those things. I think we keep doing that indefinitely. One tidbit I'll leave you with is, as we grow, we're realizing that LearnWeb3 is better looked at as a social platform than as an education platform. And there's a lot of experiments that need to be run and made to sort of assist with that direction of ours, where how do we start thinking of this as a developer community and a social community where education is a part of it, instead of thinking of it as an edtech platform with a community to answer questions.
That's a really interesting evolution that you had. Especially I like this idea that like at the end of the day you have become developer community, because there are so many courses on Udemy and so on. I'm not talking about the free, but courses you just sit alone at home and just try to find energy to finish it, but you don't. So most people don't finish these courses. But when you have a community, it's much easier to just keep up with the lessons and like have some encouragement, or maybe set up some working session with other members. So I think that's a pretty cool direction that you are getting to. I have one question, like kind of a meta question. If you could go back in time and start LearnWeb3 DAO once again, what would you do differently?
I don't know. I think mistakes have been made at various parts. Certain times things could have gone better, but honestly, I don't know if this is a satisfying answer or not, but honestly, I feel like if we hadn't made those mistakes, we wouldn't have realized that those were mistakes to begin with. I don't know if we could go back and start it once again, we'd probably do the exact same thing we did. Maybe deliver on courses a little sooner, but at the time, honestly, we were juggling between a lot of different things. So sometimes things got delayed a little bit. We didn't always, in the early days, for the most part, a lot of things needed to happen manually. Maybe been more automation around that in the early days. Maybe there could have been more sort of partnerships in the early days that happened later on instead, because we weren't really thinking about it that way. I mean, those things could have happened sooner, but I think we're very proud and very happy with where we are right now. And honestly, I wouldn't say we have any like major regrets. Like we absolutely fucked this up and we need to go back now.
It's like the full name is like LearnWeb3 DAO. So I'm wondering about this DAO component. Like, what does it mean in this case? Because it's a very popular term that's used in many different ways.
Yeah, so we've been pretty transparent about this from day one within the community, but We're not actually a DAO. We have the Twitter handle for it, but our Twitter name doesn't actually say DAO. It just says LearnWeb3, and our domain name says LearnWeb3 everywhere. The DAO part of it, we're pretty open that it is a transition that's going to happen, but we're not a DAO as of today, as of speaking, and we operate pretty much in a sort of centralized fashion, trying to be as transparent as we can with some contributors who are awarded, but I wouldn't say it's like an on-chain DAO with voting and proposals and everything going on. The reason for that primarily being is sort of getting the foundation set up is important before we transition into a full DAO structure. I think biggest inspirations coming from folks at like Gitcoin or ENS or things like that, who operated for a really long time as companies or as like centralized institutions before they did a highly successful migration to a DAO. And we believe that that's the right way to go around it. DAO from day one. The reality is DAOs might be a buzzword in Web3, but DAOs have significant problems as they exist today. They're highly unorganized. They're not good for long-term employment. The sort of decision-making, like mob control isn't really the best decision-making process per se. And I'm not sure where you stand politically, but I don't know if democracy is the best decision-making process either. So generally, like, I think there's a lot of interesting research going on by like a lot of like DAO analyst companies, like folks at Misari, folks at like other DAO analyst companies who are figuring out alternatives and better approaches than straight up like token weighted governance, where the more tokens you have, the more say you have in governance. I think there are better approaches from what I've read a little bit about them. They seem pretty promising. We need to watch those experiments take place and happen. And when we do make the transition, I think we're basically trying to make the best decision we can with the information that we have. So not saying that long term it's necessarily going to, once we have new information, maybe it turns out it wasn't the best decision, but we'll try to make the best decision we can with the information at hand. But right now, the sentiment seems to be that token weighted governance is not ideal and leads to a whole mess of logistical and administrative problems within DAOs that hopefully we can find some better alternatives to.
Yeah, I spoke with quite many founders here and, just on events, and most of them share your concerns regarding DAOs. And some of them say, okay, we might make decentralized governance on, for example, this small part of the initiative, but keep it very centralized in terms of others. And it kind of works, but full DAO is a very, very hard thing to manage. So I'm wondering, if you had a magic wand and could fix one thing about Web3, what would it be?
This is definitely biased because this is where I had most of my experience in this space prior to LearnWeb3. But the most impactful problem I see that Web3 has a capability to solve is identity. I've spent many years in the field of identity in Web3, and my genuine belief, the whole reason why I'm even in this space or why I care about this space, is the potential of solving identity problems across the globe using this technology. I can go into more detail across, because different places have different problems that can be solved somewhat differently, but with the same underlying tech. But generally, I think that DeFi is cool. DeFi is fun. It's probably one of the biggest sort of categories in the space today, and DeFi is pretty cool. However, for the average person, it also can be pretty complicated, and it's not really the best sort of sales pitch to somebody hey, how about you go here and do a deposit here and then take this and then you yield farm it over there and take those OP tokens, invest it into there. You can have concentrated liquidity here and do this and do. What the fuck are you talking about? So DeFi, it's unarguably amazing, but it's too complicated for a sales pitch. And oftentimes, majority of the world who's not that financially literate to the point of understanding the nuances of DeFi, it doesn't really make that much difference for them, I would say. NFTs, I think, are too nascent right now. NFT JPEG images and stuff, I don't think that's a long-term goal of NFTs. I think there are some cool use cases being explored by a lot of really great companies. but I think we're a little further away from seeing them actually take place and what their potential actually looks like. Most of them are ideas or experiments at this point, I would say. Identity, however, has been adopted by a lot of places already. It's identity is one of those things in Web3 that happens at a very like hush hush level. We were sold this dream 5 years ago that Web3 is going to be everywhere and you won't even know about it. I think the closest we've come to that dream is in the identity space, where major governments around the world have adopted decentralized identity standards and technologies where nobody even knows that it's happening on a blockchain or it's happening on like some sort of ledger. Just to say a few names, like the government of Canada has been doing it specifically in Vancouver. Vancouver has had a decentralized identity program running for about 2 years now. The government of Ontario recently, like this year, announced their decentralized identity program with the goal to like transition health cards, driver's licenses, banking information, financial information, health records, all of that over to like a secure decentralized ID infrastructure. If you pay taxes in Canada and you log in through your, like when you're in Canada and you want to pay taxes, you log into this thing called the CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency. And one of the ways you can log into it is through your bank account. So you can sign in. It's like logging in with Google on a website, right? So you log in with your bank account onto the CRA. And that actually uses DID infrastructure and technology under the hood. I was part of the team that helped build that solution, and it's absolutely crazy, like how nobody realizes it's on a blockchain or nobody realizes it's Web3, but it's going on under the hood over there. Then in Europe, they're adopting DID standards. In South Korea, they're adopting DID standards. In Singapore, they're adopting DID standards. Microsoft has a huge DID play going on right now with Microsoft Azure. Jack Dorsey, his Web5 TBD, it's nothing more than just PR and fancy words around what is essentially DID technology, which is also running everywhere else. And the problems, the potential of that is absolutely insane. If I could fix one thing about Web3 in a nutshell, just to wrap up, would be spreading more awareness around that field, because it feels like not a lot of people know about it. And it's a very small community of people who are working on it. And there are challenges the community, the DID community faces, problems that they face that could really benefit from more sets of eyes there. And yeah, the awareness of that is just lacking, I think.
One other question that I always ask is, what's the funniest thing that happened to you in the Web3 space?
So this is very recent. This has happened to me in the last couple of weeks. But we're hiring for LearnWeb3 right now, right? Where I have some open positions. And believe it or not, my hypothesis is I interviewed 5 North Korean hackers for that position. It was all so shady. It was such a funny experience, honestly. So we have this job posting up on like Angel List. I'm going through them day one. There's some people, like amazing on paper, great experience, great backgrounds, seem very promising. I shortlist them for interview rounds, hop on a call with them. So it was 5 people spread out over like different times, different days, right? So the first 1 or 2, I didn't really think a lot about them. Like, obviously, when I got on a call, I was asking them questions. They just generally seemed pretty incompetent to me. I was just like, they weren't able to answer properly, or like things they had listed on their resume. Like when I'd go into the technical aspects of certain things, they had no idea what they were talking about. I gave them the benefit of doubt for the most part because there was a language barrier. These people weren't native English speakers. So they were struggling with it a little bit. So I would I thought my mind didn't immediately jump into, okay, this is like something wrong here. I thought, okay, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Spent some time. I thought, okay, I don't know what happened over there. Maybe they didn't understand me or something, but maybe I don't know. They weren't able to answer the questions I was asking. It was also very sort of weird environment where this person would have they would have their webcam on, but their webcam would be here in their face, right? You wouldn't see anything. Sometimes I wouldn't even see the person's full face. I just see the upper half or the bottom half and nothing else. And there'd be huge background noise in the back. I don't know, they were sitting in a room with 100 people or something, and everybody's just talking in the background. I didn't think a whole lot about that stuff. I was just okay, whatever, AngelList probably gets a bunch of spam applicants as well. So it's just people maybe like lie down their resume a little bit, try to get interviews, whatever. This kept happening a couple more times, and the more it happened, the more I started to notice like sort of patterns, right? Similarities in those interviews. So I noticed this one thing where every time I would ask them a question, I noticed through like the video, they would like tilt their head and read an answer off a screen, right? So like obviously like most interviews, they have some common questions that happen, like give me your background, or like, like some technical questions that are somewhat fairly common, like you can expect them probably. So if I had any of those questions like that, I could see them on video turning their head, scrolling, and reading something off of a screen to me, and just saying it in like one go, no hesitation, no thinking, just like blurt it out, right? However, for the more sort of unique questions, some of the questions that we developed ourselves for like trying to figure out certain things about a person that maybe aren't found in like all interviews, I'd ask them that question and it would go one of two ways. Either they pretend like they don't understand me, and I can ask that question 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. I would type it out in the chat and they just pretend like there's audio issues, there are technical issues, or they don't get what I'm saying or whatever. The other way it went was that people would go on mute, right? They would mute themselves. I could see their hands like typing something on a keyboard. They type something on a keyboard and they just look here and there for like 2 minutes. And I'm just there. I'm like, hello, are you there? Where do you go? Hello? And they're just like staring at the screen. They're looking at me, not saying a thing, still on mute. And then 2 minutes later, suddenly they unmute and just blurt out an answer. So I was like, okay. That's when I thought, okay, maybe they're sending this question to somebody else, right? They're maybe like texting it, waiting for an answer to come back and speaking it. I was like, this is some shady stuff going on over here. I think the fourth person I interviewed, that was when I actually realized what was going on over there. Because the fourth person forgot to mute himself and did this exact thing. And I could hear like notification sounds. It was the Facebook Messenger notification sound in the background. So I was 100% sure they were sending the question out to somebody else to answer. And then I opened his resume again while I was on the call, and I scrolled down. And at the very last page on his resume, under past projects, I'd missed this before, but under past projects, he had Uniswap and PartyDAO listed. So I was like, okay. I asked him, so when did you work at Uniswap, right? His answer was, I don't remember. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't remember? Did you work there or not? It's like, oh, I forgot. I don't know when I worked there. Okay. What did you do there exactly? And he's like, oh, I wrote their core smart contracts. I'm like, are you serious, bro?
You got Hayden who's applying to you.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, that seems shady. And then I asked him the same questions about PartyDAO, and I know the folks who are like the founders of PartyDAO. One of them's like a friend of a friend, and he's the person who wrote PartyDAO smart contracts as well. So I asked him, like, when did you work at PartyDAO? I was like, I don't know, I don't remember. What did you do at PartyDAO? I did the core smart contracts. Fuck's sake, dude. My friend of a friend did the core smart contract. It's clearly not you. I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, okay, I think I have enough. Thank you. I'll talk later. I cut the call. The fifth one was sort of just icing on the cake. Went very similarly, had fake projects listed on the resume, asked him about it. The funny thing about this one was I didn't have to cut the call. His face just went pale when I asked those questions, and he ended the call like mid-interview and just disappeared. So I posted a thread on Twitter about this experience. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I'm just meeting random ass people on interviews. I don't know what their goal is. They're clearly not trying to get a job. I don't know what's happening. And then somebody linked me to an older Twitter thread posted by Jonathan Wu, who's the founder of Aztec Network, where he had the same experience like 3 months before. And I texted him and I was talking to him. I was like, what the fuck is going on over here? And he's like, my hypothesis is that these are North Korean hackers, is I can't recognize like accents very well. And he was like, yeah, this is definitely a North Korean accent that I noticed in my interviews. And his best hypothesis to all of this was that these people aren't out there trying to get a job. These people are out there trying to establish a direct line of communication with you to send you malware or phishing links. And he said he actually got a lot of them from these people he interviewed. Like he'd send them like take home assignments, or something like that, ask for a GitHub link. But it wasn't actually a GitHub link. It would be like some sort of phishing website or some sort of malware links or whatever. It's just crazy, man. It's crazy. I did not expect that when I posted the jobs first. It's insane the length these people go to try to hack somebody.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that they are not that well prepared. I mean, like, if they had someone more competent, but it looks like this, cold calling boiler room of hackers where they just try to do the volume and okay, we'll apply to 10,000 places. And even if we have 1% of, success rate, it's still a lot of places to hack. So
absolutely. I mean, think of it like this way, right? If they were to successfully hack me, or if they were to successfully hack Jonathan or whatever, there's a decent likelihood that, well, I don't know about Jonathan, but at least for me, I know like my computer has the private keys for sort of the LearnWeb3 accounts, right? The LearnWeb3 sort of multi-sig, like not even multi-sig, like quote unquote treasury accounts per se. Aztec Network has significantly more money than us. So Jonathan, if his account got hacked, they probably have a stronger multi-sig. But if their account got hacked, there's probably like hundreds of millions at stake over there. They don't really need to be successful every single time. If they can just get one person or a couple of companies to fall for this, it's absolutely insane. I just never thought I'd see something like this in like hiring. It's been a crazy experience.
Yeah, the beauty of remote hiring. So I got another question that I always ask, and it's, what were the most mind-blowing Web3 projects for you?
I think it's just the OGs, honestly. Uniswap was absolutely crazy. Dig into it technically and you'll love it. Uniswap, Aave, ENS, Gitcoin, I'd say. Fractional art is kind of cool. All of this not including all the DID stuff, but the DID stuff, the entire community, everything they do from the DID standards to sort of like side tree algorithmic implementations, the different sort of message formats they've implemented, standardizations they've implemented. That's all absolutely amazing, but that's a biased response. I think Ceramic is absolutely amazing. Again, biased response because I used to work there, but Ceramic is one thing that if it succeeds, and that's a big if, because Ceramic is trying to tackle some huge problems, but if they succeed, it will be absolutely revolutionary. I think Ceramic single-handedly could cause a revolution in how data privacy, data security, and data composability work all over the globe, which is a huge, huge market. And yeah, and I've always loved the graph for making it so easy for developers to build in this space.
I'm wondering, what's the best place for people to learn about LearnWeb3? Where should they go? Should they go to Twitter, Discord, website, or anywhere else?
Learn more about the project. I think that would have to be the Discord, because I think that's where we talk about these sort of quote unquote off topic things that aren't really on the website, because the website is really focused on the courses and the education part of it. Really talk about sort of day-to-day things or like vision stuff or like long-term stuff either. I think Discord's the best place if anybody wants to continue this conversation forward, and we'd be more than happy to chat there.
Okay, so I'm wondering, the last question, do you have any ideas for guests, some other builders like you that might, share their learnings with our audience?
I genuinely believe so. Ceramic, if you can get anybody from Ceramic, and maybe I can try to make intros there for your audience, people might not have heard of them. Ceramic's relatively, again, they're one of those projects that has been building for a really long time, but a lot of things change. And what they're doing right now, where they recently announced Ceramic Compose DB, I think like a week or 10 days ago for the first time, it's absolutely revolutionary. If you can get into that, help bring more awareness to that, I think they're going to be absolute game changers for the entire industry. Yeah, they're my top recommendation by far.
I must admit, I know about Ceramic for sure. Even my friends run a project using Ceramic, but I haven't heard about this new announcement, so I'm going to check it out and learn more.
Yeah, so basically, ComposeDB kind of like all the old stuff that Ceramic had prior to last week, I would say that was publicly available, and that was like how developers build on Ceramic. It has been improved 100 times almost pretty much rebuilt from scratch. Everything has almost been pretty much rebuilt from scratch to based off of the learnings they had the last couple of years in seeing developers use Ceramic and how things have changed and how the market has changed. Rebuilt from scratch to be 100 times simpler, better, more composable, and a step towards the sort of the direction of Ceramic's future. Let's say it's a very, very promising implementation of things that enables possibilities that Ceramic in the past was either too restrictive for or too hard to actually do. Now it just makes things a whole lot simpler and allows for like many more types of apps to be built on Ceramic than was previously possible.
Okay, that's cool. So I'm going to learn a lot because this data part of building is extremely important, especially if you want to build bigger things. And I see that people have much bigger ambition and bigger visions when it comes to Web3 products lately. So it's going to be super cool.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Haardik, like, thanks a lot. It was cool to have you here. And, if anyone from the audience would like to learn more, just either go to the website and learn Web3 or go to the Discord and learn more about the project. And I bet that you're going to be happy with what you are going to find there.
Absolutely.